My sister Celeste thought she was just doing her job that Tuesday morning in March. She'd been cleaning aircraft cockpits at Holloman Air Force Base for 3 years, always meticulous, always thorough. She had no idea that one small fabric patch, hidden behind a pilot's seat, would expose a decades-old conspiracy and put her life in immediate danger. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Celeste Hartwell was 28 then, the kind of person who found peace in orderly work. She preferred the early morning shifts when the hangar was quiet and she could focus without distractions. Growing up, our household had been chaos. Our father drank too much, our mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us fed, and nothing ever felt stable or predictable. But Celeste had always been different. Even as a kid, she would organize her dresser drawers by color and clean her room when she was stressed. When she landed the civilian maintenance job at the base, it felt like finding her calling. The work required precision, attention to detail, and the kind of methodical approach that came naturally to her. She took pride in her spotless safety record and the way pilots would specifically request aircraft she had serviced because they knew everything would be perfect. The military environment gave her something our family had never provided: structure, respect for protocol, and the satisfaction of contributing to something bigger than herself. She wasn't just cleaning cockpits. She was ensuring pilot safety, maintaining equipment that protected our country. For the first time in her life, Celeste felt truly valuable. She had been saving every extra dollar from her job to help with our mother's medical bills. Mom had been diagnosed with diabetes the year before, and the medications were expensive even with insurance. Celeste never complained about the early hours or the physical demands of the work. She would arrive at 5 in the morning, methodically, clean each assigned aircraft, and take genuine satisfaction in leaving every surface spotless and every system functioning perfectly. Her coworkers respected her quiet competence. She wasn't the type to join them for drinks after work or share personal stories during breaks, but they knew they could count on her. Supervisors praised her thoroughness in performance reviews. Pilots trusted that any aircraft Celeste had serviced would be in perfect condition. That Tuesday started exactly like hundreds of others. Celeste clocked in at 5 a.m., gathered her cleaning supplies, and reviewed her assignment sheet. She was scheduled to deep clean the cockpit of an F-16 Fighting Falcon that had returned the previous evening from what the flight logs described as routine training exercises over the Nevada desert. But the moment she approached the aircraft, something felt different. There were unusual scuff marks on the exterior that didn't match normal wear patterns. The cockpit had a faint chemical smell that wasn't typical fuel or hydraulic fluid. Most pilots left their aircraft in predictable condition, but this one felt wrong somehow. Celeste trusted her instincts. 3 years of experience had taught her to notice details others missed. She had prevented 2 potential safety violations by catching maintenance issues that had been overlooked. Her supervisors had learned to take her observations seriously as she began her systematic cleaning routine, starting with the instrument panel and working her way back toward the ejection seat. She had no idea she was about to discover something that would change everything she thought she knew about her job, her safety, and the aircraft she had been so carefully maintaining. The fabric patch hidden behind that pilot's seat wasn't just a piece of forgotten equipment. It was evidence of a murder that had been covered up for 30 years, and finding it would force my sister to choose between her comfortable, quiet life and a truth that powerful people had killed to protect. Celeste had always been the steady one in our family. While I was getting into trouble in high school and our older brother Marcus was bouncing between jobs, she had quietly built herself a life that made sense. The civilian maintenance position at Holloman Air Force Base wasn't glamorous, but it gave her something she'd never had growing up: predictability and respect. Our childhood in Alamogordo had been a series of financial crises and late-night arguments. Dad worked construction when he wasn't drinking, which wasn't often enough. Mom cleaned houses during the day and waited tables at night, coming home exhausted and defeated. We lived in a double-wide trailer that leaked when it rained and never stayed warm in winter. Celeste used to clean obsessively as a kid, organizing our shared bedroom over and over, as if creating perfect order in one small space could somehow balance out the chaos everywhere else. When she turned 18, she didn't follow the typical path of her classmates who either joined the military or left town entirely. Instead, she took community college classes in mechanical systems and applied for civilian positions on the base. She wanted the stability of military structure without the commitment of enlistment. The day she got hired as an aircraft maintenance technician was the first time I'd seen her genuinely smile in years. The work suited her personality perfectly. Every aircraft had specific protocols, detailed checklists, and measurable standards. There was no ambiguity, no guesswork, just systematic processes that produced predictable results. She could spend hours methodically cleaning and inspecting cockpits, finding satisfaction in the precision required, and the knowledge that pilot safety depended on her thoroughness. Celeste's colleagues quickly learned she was reliable in ways that went beyond showing up on time. She caught details others missed, questioned anything that seemed irregular, and never cut corners even when supervisors weren't watching. Pilots began specifically requesting aircraft she had serviced because they trusted her work. Tech Sergeant Rodriguez, her direct supervisor, had told her multiple times that she had the best safety record in the civilian maintenance division. The money wasn't extraordinary, but it was steady, and for our family, steady income felt like winning the lottery. Celeste was finally able to help Mom with medical bills and even started a small emergency fund. She rented a one-bedroom apartment near the base, furnished it simply but carefully, and took pride in having her own space where everything stayed exactly where she put it. Her routine had become almost ritualistic. She arrived at the hangar every morning at 5 a.m., reviewed her assignment sheet while drinking coffee from the same thermos, and approached each aircraft with the same systematic method. She would start with the exterior inspection, noting any unusual wear or damage, then move to the cockpit interior, cleaning every surface and checking every system according to protocol. That particular Tuesday morning in March felt completely normal at first. The assignment sheet listed one F-16 Fighting Falcon for deep cleaning and inspection. The aircraft had returned from training exercises the previous evening, and the pilot had logged no mechanical issues or concerns. Standard procedure for routine maintenance. But the moment Celeste approached the aircraft, her trained instincts picked up subtle irregularities. The exterior showed scuff patterns that didn't match normal training flight wear. There were small scratches near the cockpit that suggested the canopy had been opened and closed more frequently than typical. Most noticeably, there was a faint chemical odor that wasn't consistent with standard fuel or hydraulic fluid residue. Celeste had learned to trust these instincts. 3 years of experience had taught her that aircraft, like people, told stories. Through their condition, pilots had different flying styles that left characteristic wear patterns. Training flights produced predictable types of stress on equipment. Combat simulations left specific kinds of residue and wear. This F-16 told a story that didn't match its official flight log. She began her cleaning routine with extra attention to detail, photographing anything unusual before cleaning it away. This was standard practice she had developed early in her career after missing a potential safety issue because she had cleaned away evidence before documenting it. Her supervisor had praised her initiative in developing this protocol. As she worked her way systematically through the cockpit interior, Celeste felt the familiar satisfaction of bringing order to complexity. Each cleaned surface, each inspected component brought the aircraft closer to perfect operational condition. She had no way of knowing that her meticulous attention to detail was about to uncover evidence that someone had hidden for 30 years, evidence that would transform her quiet, predictable life into something far more dangerous and significant than she could have imagined. Celeste was working behind the pilot's ejection seat when her cleaning cloth caught on something that shouldn't have been there. She had cleaned this model of F-16 hundreds of times and knew every standard component by touch. This was something foreign, something hidden. Reaching carefully into the narrow space between the seat padding and the aircraft frame, her fingers found a small piece of fabric that had been deliberately sewn into the upholstery. It took several minutes of careful work to extract it without damaging whatever it was. When she finally pulled it free, she found herself holding a handmade patch about the size of a silver dollar. The patch wasn't military issue. Someone had crafted it by hand using dark blue fabric with white thread embroidery. The stitching formed what looked like coordinates: 37.2431 degran, 115.7930 W. Below the coordinates were dates stitched in smaller thread: 8/15/94, 9/22/94, 10/3/94, 11/7/94. At the bottom, almost too small to read, were the initials DT. Celeste photographed the patch from multiple angles, documenting exactly where she had found it. Something about the careful craftsmanship and the hidden location told her this wasn't random. Someone had taken considerable effort to place this, evidence where it would only be found during the most thorough maintenance procedures. She finished cleaning the cockpit, but her mind kept returning to the patch. The coordinates looked familiar, though she couldn't place why. The dates were from 1994. Long before she had started working at the base. Someone had hidden this patch for nearly 30 years, and now she needed to decide what to do with it. Her first instinct was to follow protocol and report the discovery to her supervisor. Tech Sergeant Rodriguez was reviewing maintenance schedules in his office when she knocked. He looked up with his usual friendly smile. "Find something interesting in that F-16, Celeste?" She showed him the patch and explained where she had discovered it. The moment Rodriguez saw the embroidered coordinates and dates, his expression changed completely. The color drained from his face, and he set down his coffee cup with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Where exactly did you find this?" His voice had lost all its casual warmth. Sewn into the seat padding behind the ejection seat, it was completely hidden. "I only found it because my cloth snagged on the thread." Rodriguez stared at the patch for several long seconds, then looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Fear mixed with something that looked like recognition. "Celeste, I need you to wait here. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Don't leave this office, I'll be right back." He left quickly, taking the patch with him. Celeste sat in his office wondering what she had stumbled into. Rodriguez had been her supervisor for 3 years, and she had never seen him react to anything with that kind of intensity. 10 minutes later, Rodriguez returned with Commander Mitchell Blackwood, an officer Celeste had only seen from a distance. Blackwood was tall and severe, with graying hair and the kind of bearing that made lower-ranking personnel instinctively stand straighter when he passed. She had never spoken to him directly. Rodriguez handed the patch to Commander Blackwood without a word. The moment Blackwood's eyes focused on the embroidered symbols, his entire body went rigid. His jaw clenched, and Celeste watched his face go through a series of expressions: recognition, shock, something that looked like grief, and then a cold, controlled anger. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Blackwood continued staring at the patch, his hands beginning to shake slightly. When he finally looked up, his eyes had the intensity of someone who had just seen a ghost. "Everyone out," he ordered in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Clear the hangar, now." Rodriguez moved immediately toward the door, but Blackwood's voice stopped him. "Sergeant Rodriguez, escort everyone else out. Ms. Hartwell stays." Celeste felt her stomach drop. She had been following standard protocol by reporting her discovery, but somehow that simple decision had triggered something far bigger and more serious than routine maintenance procedures. Commander Blackwood's reaction made it clear that the patch wasn't just an interesting historical artifact. It was evidence of something that someone had tried very hard to hide, and finding it had put her in the middle of a situation she didn't understand, but that was clearly dangerous. As Rodriguez left to clear the hangar, Commander Blackwood continued, staring at the patch in his hands, and Celeste realized that her quiet, predictable life had just ended forever. Commander Blackwood waited until the hangar was completely empty before he spoke again. The silence felt oppressive as he continued studying the patch, his hand still trembling slightly. When he finally looked at Celeste, his expression was a mixture of desperation and something that looked like hope. "Ms. Hartwell, I need to know exactly what you saw, who you told, and what you've done with this information." His voice was controlled, but she could hear the tension underneath. Celeste straightened in her chair. "I found the patch sewn into the seat padding of the F-16. I photographed it for documentation, then showed it to Sergeant Rodriguez following standard protocol for unusual discoveries. I haven't spoken to anyone else about it." You photographed it? Blackwood's voice sharpened. Show me. She pulled out her phone and showed him the images she had taken. As he scrolled through the photos, his face grew even more pale. When he reached the close-up shot of the initials DT, he actually closed his eyes for a moment. Ms. Hartwell, what you found relates to classified operations that ended before you were born. These coordinates, these dates, they're connected to events that certain people have worked very hard to keep buried. For your own safety, you need to forget this happened. Delete these photos. Never speak of this patch again, and continue with your normal duties. But something in his tone didn't match his words. Despite his authoritative delivery, she heard desperation underneath, almost like he was pleading with her rather than ordering her. And there was something else, something in the way he had reacted to seeing those initials DT that suggested this wasn't just about classified operations. This was personal. Celeste had inherited our father's stubborn streak along with our mother's sense of justice. Growing up poor had taught her to recognize when powerful people were lying, and Commander Blackwood was definitely not telling her the whole truth. More importantly, something about the careful craftsmanship of that patch told her that whoever had hidden it had wanted it to be found eventually. Sir, with all due respect, I can't just forget. Someone took considerable effort to hide this patch where only thorough maintenance would find it. They used specific coordinates and dates, hand-stitched initials. This wasn't random. Someone wanted this information preserved. Blackwood stared at her for a long moment. Ms. Hartwell, you have no idea what you're getting involved in. There are people who have killed to keep this information secret. If you pursue this, you're putting yourself in real danger. Maybe that. Someone was the pilot who put it there, she continued, ignoring his warning. Maybe they knew they were in danger and needed to leave evidence where someone like me would eventually find it. The commander's composure finally cracked. He sat down heavily in Rodriguez's chair and put his head in his hands. When he looked up again, his eyes were filled with a pain that looked decades old. The pilot who hid this patch was Captain Diana Thornfield. She was investigating unauthorized flights, illegal activities involving military aircraft. She was going to testify before a military tribunal about what she had discovered. Her plane crashed during what was listed as a training exercise 3 days before her scheduled testimony. Celeste felt her heart rate increase. You think she was murdered? I know she was murdered, but I've never been able to prove it. The investigation was closed quickly, ruled pilot error. All her evidence disappeared. Her personal effects were cleared out before I could examine them. For 30 years, I've known the truth but had no way to prove it. Who was she to you? Blackwood's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She was my wife. The revelation hit Celeste like a physical blow. This wasn't about national security or classified operations. This was about a husband who had spent 30 years knowing his wife was murdered and being powerless to prove it. The coordinates on that patch, she said slowly. They lead to where she crashed, don't they? Nevada test site, Area 51. She was documenting flights that weren't in any official logs, weapons testing that violated international treaties, possibly arms dealing involving high-ranking military officials. She sewed that patch into her ejection. CETA's insurance, proof that would survive even if she didn't. Celeste made her decision in that moment. Commander, I still have the photos on my phone. Those coordinates can be researched. Those dates can be cross-referenced with official records. If Captain Thornfield left this evidence for someone to find, then someone should act on it. Blackwood looked at her with an expression that mixed gratitude with terror. Ms. Hartwell, if we pursue this, there's no going back. These people have had 30 years to bury this secret. They won't hesitate to eliminate threats. Then we better be very careful about how we proceed. That evening, Celeste sat in her apartment with her laptop, staring at the coordinates from the patch. 37.2431 again, 115.7930 to W. She had promised Commander Blackwood she would be careful, but she couldn't stop thinking about Captain Diana Thornfield and the evidence she had risked her life to preserve. She entered the coordinates into a mapping program and watched as the location appeared on her screen. Nevada test site, just as Blackwood had said. The area was heavily restricted, part of the sprawling complex that included what people commonly called Area 51. Diana had been documenting something that happened in one of the most secretive locations in the country. Using her base computer access credentials from home, Celeste began cross-referencing the dates embroidered on the patch with official flight records from 1994. The process was painstaking, requiring her to search through multiple databases and archive documents that most people would never think to examine. The first date, August 15, 1994, appeared in training logs as a routine navigation exercise. But when she dug deeper into fuel consumption records and maintenance logs, the numbers didn't match. The aircraft had used far more fuel than a training flight would require, and had logged significantly more flight hours than documented in the official mission reports. The pattern repeated for each date on the patch. Every flight was officially listed as training or routine patrol, but the supporting documentation told a different story. These aircraft were flying much longer distances, carrying heavier payloads, and requiring more extensive post-flight maintenance than training exercises would explain. By midnight, Celeste had compiled a list of 15 flights between August and November 1994 that showed the same discrepancies. All had been piloted by either Captain Diana Thornfield or 3 other pilots, whose names appeared repeatedly in the records. All flights originated from Holloman, but showed fuel consumption consistent with trips to Nevada and back. She was about to close her laptop when she decided to search for one more piece of information: what had happened to the other 3 pilots who had flown these mysterious missions. Captain Robert Hayes died in a car accident 6 weeks after Diana's crash. Major Jennifer Walsh suffered a fatal heart attack at age 34, just 2 months later. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Torres was killed in what was ruled a training accident 8 months after that. 4 pilots who had flown unauthorized missions to classified locations. All 4 dead within a year, all under circumstances that could be explained as accidents or natural causes. The mathematical probability of such a coincidence was virtually impossible. Celeste's hands were shaking as she printed out all the documentation she had compiled. She had uncovered evidence of a systematic cover-up that had lasted 3 decades, involving not just Diana's murder, but the deaths of 3 other military officers who had known too much about whatever illegal activities they had been forced to participate in. The next morning, she arrived at the base early and found Commander Blackwood waiting for her in the hangar. His face was grim, and she could tell he hadn't slept. "Ms. Hartwell, we need to talk. I've been making inquiries about that patch, and I've learned that certain people are very interested in knowing who found it and what they plan to do with the information." She handed him the folder of documents she had compiled. "Commander, I think you need to see what I found." As Blackwood read through her research, his expression shifted from concern to amazement to something that looked like relief mixed with grief. When he finished, he looked at her with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. "Diana was right," he said quietly. She knew they were using military aircraft for arms deals, selling weapons to foreign governments and keeping the profits. She documented everything, but they killed her before she could expose it. These other pilots, they must have threatened to come forward after Diana's death. "There's more," Celeste said. "I traced the serial numbers of the aircraft used on these flights. 3 of them were officially retired and sold as scrap metal within 6 months of Diana's death. But the sales records show they were purchased by shell companies that don't actually exist." Blackwood stared at her. "They weren't scrapped. They were sold intact to whoever was buying the weapons. The corruption goes deeper than just unauthorized flights. This was a systematic operation involving aircraft theft, weapons trafficking, and multiple murders to cover it up. And based on what I found in current maintenance records, I think it might still be happening." Commander Blackwood stood up slowly, and for the first time since Celeste had met him, he looked like a man who had finally found hope after 30 years of despair. "Ms. Hartwell, Diana hid that patch because she believed someday someone like you would find it, someone with the skills and integrity to uncover the truth. She was counting on someone who wouldn't be intimidated into silence. What do we do now? Now we make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain." Commander Blackwood knew they needed help from people outside the military structure to ensure their evidence wouldn't be buried again. He contacted Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist from the Albuquerque Journal who had built a reputation for exposing government corruption. He also reached out to Colonel Patricia Wells from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, someone he had served with years earlier and trusted completely. The meeting took place in Celeste's apartment on a Saturday morning. Blackwood brought copies of all the documentation Celeste had compiled, along with additional records he had quietly gathered using his command authority. Sarah Chen recorded everything while Colonel Wells reviewed the evidence with the practiced eye of someone who had investigated military fraud for 20 years. "This is substantial," Colonel Wells said after examining the fuel consumption discrepancies and cross-referencing them with the suspicious deaths. "These patterns are consistent with organized criminal activity, not isolated incidents. But we need to be extremely careful about how we proceed. If these people killed 4 military officers to protect their operation, they won't hesitate to kill civilians." Sarah Chen had been taking notes throughout the meeting. "I can protect my sources and publish this story in a way that forces an official investigation. Once this information is public, it becomes much harder for anyone to eliminate the people who discovered it." Over the following weeks, they worked together to build an airtight case. Celeste's meticulous documentation skills proved invaluable as she helped organize the evidence in a way that clearly showed the pattern of illegal activities. Her ability to spot discrepancies in maintenance records revealed additional aircraft that had been used in the trafficking operation. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with the headline, "Hidden Patch Exposes 30-Year Military Cover-Up of Arms Trafficking and Murder." Sarah Chen had written a detailed investigation that laid out the evidence methodically, beginning with Celeste's discovery of Diana's patch and ending with the suspicious deaths of all 4 pilots who had participated in the unauthorized flights. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the Air Force announced a formal investigation. Congressional representatives demanded hearings. The FBI opened a criminal investigation into the deaths of the 4 pilots. Most importantly, the evidence was now public, which meant it couldn't be buried or dismissed quietly. 3 months later, the investigation led to arrests of 6 high-ranking military officials and 4 defense contractors who had been running the arms trafficking operation. The scheme had generated millions of dollars in illegal profits over several years, with participants using their positions to steal military aircraft and weapons for sale to foreign buyers. Commander Blackwood was vindicated completely. The Air Force issued a formal apology for the inadequate investigation of his wife's death and posthumously awarded Captain Diana Thornfield the Distinguished Service Medal for her courage in attempting to expose the corruption. Her death was officially reclassified as murder, and her name was cleared of any suggestion of pilot error. For Celeste, the recognition was both overwhelming and deeply satisfying. She received commendations from the Air Force, the FBI, and several congressional representatives. More meaningfully, she was promoted to lead maintenance technician and given oversight of training programs for civilian personnel on military bases throughout the region. The money from interview fees and a book deal that Sarah Chen helped her negotiate meant Celeste could pay off all of our mother's medical debt and help her buy a small house in town. But more important than the financial benefits was the knowledge that her attention to detail had finally served a purpose bigger than routine maintenance. "I used to think my job was just about keeping aircraft functional," Celeste told me over dinner one evening several months after the story broke. "But I learned that sometimes the most important thing we can do is pay attention to details that other people want us to ignore." The experience changed her perspective on everything. She still arrived at work early and maintained the same systematic approach to her duties. But now she understood that her careful, methodical nature wasn't just useful for maintaining equipment. It was a tool for uncovering truth and holding powerful people accountable. Commander Blackwood retired from the Air Force 6 months later, but he stayed in touch with Celeste. They had formed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and the shared knowledge that they had honored Diana Thornfield's sacrifice by ensuring her evidence finally reached the people who could act on it. "Diana always believed that truth finds a way to surface," he told Celeste at his retirement ceremony. "She was right. It just took 30 years and someone with your integrity to make it happen." My sister still works at Holloman Air Force Base, still arrives early, and maintains her systematic approach to aircraft maintenance. But now she knows that her work serves a purpose beyond keeping pilots safe. She understands that ordinary people doing ordinary jobs with extraordinary integrity have the power to change the world.